Are we on? Okay, everybody, this is live television for you. We make mistakes, but at least we come right on top. Now, that being said, welcome to this extra special episode of Frank About Health. It is a follow up to the D.I.D show that we did with our special guest, Logan Pethtel, in January. And as you recall from that show, it was with Karen Ross and Dr. Marissa Harris from Chicago, who gave their interesting overview, clinical overview about what DID is. And we just knew from the complete feedback we received and the hundreds of views that we got on our YouTube channel, there needed to be a live follow up, including our technical difficulties. That being said, I want to first issue my disclaimer. Dissociative identity disorder is an interesting disorder because it has its own stigmas and it has its own controversial aspects to it. However, it is something that is livable, as Logan has testified before on our previous episode. We're going to talk more about that with him and with Marissa and Karen. But any of the comments that you listen to that you do not agree with or that you feel are trying to dissuade you from ongoing mental health treatments, this show is not for you. This is just the thoughts of a conversation, food for thought that we are going to engage on in the next hour. They are not to make you come up with any other medical decisions that we are not in the business of advocating for. Therefore, they're not the thoughts of talkradio.nyc or of Frank About Health or of Karen Ross Now or of Dr. Marissa Harris. They are just the thoughts of Logan Pethtel. That all being said, I hope we did not go too much of a delay when we started, but I want to welcome you all back to Frank About Health. And that being said, let's start with you, Logan. What has been your life like since last January?
Well, first of all, it's great to be back, Frank. This is certainly an odd feeling being on the other end of the engineering board, but it's nice to get out of my comfort zone every once in a while. Life's been fairly standard. Things have changed, new alters, new just life, just life.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then basically, I want all the viewers and listeners to understand that typically when Karen and I do a show at the beginning of each month, it is typically an awareness month of that particular health event that's going on. If you recall, last February, we started with Cardiac Awareness Month. Now, there are a lot of other things to be aware of in the month of March. So I'm going to turn it over to Karen to explain what is going on in February, but then explain why we've chosen to do this follow up show in place. Karen.
Okay, great, Frank. Yeah, there are a number of conditions or uh, diseases that are acknowledged in the month of March. And as Frank said, because of the popularity of the subject of DID, we decided to take this week and focus on that, especially since Logan could join us, which is terrific. But I'm just going to briefly mention some of the conditions that are honored in March. So if it's something you're dealing with, you could probably get information from a local association, something like that, if you feel like you need some help. It's National Kidney Month. I had kidney stones years and years ago. So when they say kidney, I immediately think of it. Thankfully, it's been a long time. A couple of different awarenesses regarding our eyes. Workplace Eye Wellness Month. It's Save Your Vision Month. So it's a good time to take care of your eyes. If you haven't seen your ophthalmologist or your optometrist recently, maybe it's time you get that on the books. It is Pulmonary Rehabilitation Month. People have been dealing with asthma. Logan, you mentioned asthma earlier, or other lung associated conditions. It's a month to pay attention to that. Brain Injury Awareness Month, National Nutrition Month. We all should pay attention to that. Anyway, there are a few others. On March 30th, it's National Doctor's Day. So if you have a doctor's appointment on the 30th, be sure to wish him or her a happy day. He or she may not know what you're talking about, but you can tell them that you're honoring them because it's National Doctor's Day. So that's mentioning just a few. And Frank, I think you recently learned of another date in March that honors what we're talking about today. So give us a little more
Exactly.
information about that.
Well, I guess it was all nirvana in many ways. As I mentioned, this particular episode that we aired in January reached a lot of critical impact that it's now featured on my homepage on my website and through my Instagram as well as LinkedIn following. In addition to Logan himself, I was made aware that March 7th, 2024, which is today, is, well, I'm not playing with the phone again, Dissociative Identity Disorder Awareness Day. I was about to show the article that I received, but I just want to be able to be organic during the show. So that being said, we're going to work with Logan again, and I believe you have a lot of followers listening to the show. So we are going to be welcoming questions and answers from them throughout the show. We want pretty much to have an overview of what we discussed on the previous show. Plus, as I said earlier, Logan, find out how things have changed since it aired. And also finally meet Marissa live, because we didn't have a chance to do that when we were able to cross correspond with each other through technology. But by having it live and organic, this could be the setting of discussing other serious mental health issues along the rest of the calendar year that we're here with Frank About Health. But I really just like the kind of advocacy that D.I.D brings to the platform. And being that I have been fighting for epilepsy advocacy for the past 2.5 years, working with this whole notion of D.I.D and understanding the clinical as well as the social impacts that the condition has is going to be a benefit to everyone who's watching the show, as well as to people in the medical profession. So hopefully when we meet with Marissa later on, we'll have a chance to learn more on that side. But I guess that brings me to Marissa. I was going to go and talk about her brief background. Again, I've only met her today for the first time. So I do know she's published in Psychology Today magazine, and she has her own website, which during the commercial break I will highlight for you. But I want Marissa, if you could, when you unmute, you could just introduce yourself and talk about your clinical background. And I know that people who saw the first episode already got a sense of that, but again, you were commenting primarily on Logan. So share us your whole entire expertise and background.
Okay, well, I'll try to condense it. Yeah, so I've been, I started in the field about 26 years ago this year. And so I've started in the field of developmental disabilities and then just kind of transitioned in mental health after that, and worked in forensic psychology for a long period of time, and then transitioned still in the mental health field, but then also substance abuse, and then worked with the Department of Veteran Affairs. And then after that, I transitioned kind of around COVID time into my own practice. But I think what sort of got me interested in specifically dissociative identity disorder is the individuals that I have worked with, and just really understanding that there was more to dissociation than what maybe we might traditionally think, which is sort of spacing off and kind of not really connected in the moment, and realizing that there was a lot more of a vast world within that. So I think all of this experience that I've had really led me to highlight down that a lot of the individuals that I've worked with, especially like in the forensic field, majority, if not 100% of them, had all had trauma. And so there was this connection between trauma and then substance abuse, and what is it about substance use in particular. And then I learned later on that that is actually sort of like essentially like a side effect of trauma, like how our bodies disconnect from the things that we don't want to remember. So I just really wanted to know the why, the deep understanding of why. And I think that's why this experience and learning from so many people or individuals I worked with helped me understand the why from their stories. So that's what sort of led me into this deeper path of really focusing on how does dissociation look from the lens of trauma, and then really exploring that deeper.
Awesome. Awesome. Logan, you mentioned earlier, I mean, even on the show that we did earlier, that it was literally lots of traumas that created your various alters. But as you indicated, a new one has evolved over the last 30, 60 days. Would you say it was trauma-based, as Marissa indicated, the potential link to it, to D.I.D., or was it some other basis? Because I think you're still learning who this new alter is, correct?
Yeah, we're still learning things about the new alter. He hasn't really picked a name for himself beyond just a play on the number alter he is in the system. But I can't really say for sure if it was trauma or not, because it could have been something that happened 10 or 20 years ago that's only just now bearing fruit and coming to life because it's been hidden away until I was in a position where I was able to receive it.
Right. Interesting. No, I mean, I guess what I'm looking forward to the next two segments of this show, because if you've noticed in the chat box, we're about to go to our first break. But Marissa, your comments on trauma, and Logan, your comments on this new alter and the time of which it has evolved, which is still questionable, is going to be the crux of our second segment. I know that we're going to go into a commercial break, and when we return, I want everyone, including your Twitch followers out there, Logan, to ask questions as we learn about this. Both of you are going to put me and Karen in a D.I.D. course right now. And you know how excited I am about this topic, as I'm sure you are, Marissa, the why. I mean, not only the why, but the unique quality that Logan has presented himself with, being able, and I've used the term loosely, integrate, but I know that clinically that is much more of a loaded word, which I gather you'll also discuss further when returned. How Logan fits in that condition of integration, especially if he's still creating other alters in his system. So, ladies and gentlemen, did you know he had dissociative identity disorder? Yes, that's the name of this episode. It's the follow-up from our January show, which had over 150 YouTube viewers. I want to thank all of you out there for that. And when we return, we will be here to have a Q&A with Marissa and Logan about D.I.D., its relationship to trauma, and the whole notion of where integration plays in. So, Karen, get ready to rock and roll as we celebrate Dissociative Identity Disorder Day right here on Frank About Health, both on talkradio.nyc, on Twitch, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. We'll be back in a few.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back. This is segment 2 of D.I.D. Did you know that Logan had it? Logan Pethtel is a unique member of the talkradio.nyc family. He is traditionally the engineer of this show. And because of the impact that the show brought back in January, we had the need for a follow-up. So all 4 of us could be in the room live and ready for all of your questions and answers. And I'm sure, Karen, you mentioned we have our own questions from the previous show that we yet haven't touched upon. So how do you think we should proceed? Would you like to start asking those questions, or do we want Marissa and Logan to start the conversation and then we go from there?
Well, I do have a question because at the end of the last segment, the word trauma was brought up more than once. So I guess my question would be, is that always a factor in someone developing D.I.D? And if not, if there are cases where trauma is not a factor, what then might be the cause?
Yeah. Okay, take it from here, yes. I guess in my experience of learning dissociative identity disorder and just even in like trainings to work on helping somebody manage or recover the emotions related to that, typically the understanding is that there is always usually some type of trauma in itself that occurs. Oftentimes it's usually about the parent either or the caregiver, a caregiver, not being able to provide a specific type of level of care to that child in some way, not knowing how to soothe themselves. And when traumatic things happen, usually the body, children in the beginning are typically sort of separated, essentially. And so then a traumatic thing occurs, and then the body starts to develop what they call fault lines, similar to like, let's say, fault lines with the earth. If there's a crack in the earth's crust, then an earthquake occurs. That's sort of the same thing in the body. If the body is experiencing a traumatic event, then we have a tendency to learn how to compartmentalize that trauma. And it helps us sort of take that trauma and place it somewhere else so as to not have to deal with the full impact of what that feels like. And so, and these fault lines essentially represent in the mind vulnerabilities or things that we have not yet been able to manage in some sort of way. So then oftentimes the body creates that, what they call the structural dissociation. The body takes it sort of away. It helps us kind of compartmentalize our identity, or, and in that sense, it also creates a lack of integration, because what Piaget will say, you have not completed the act of triumph, the child in that particular sense. Like, it has not been formulated, that experience. So it comes and it gets sort of frozen in time, in a sense. And then oftentimes those alters or parts of ourself are created in order to deal with what is experienced during that time. So it helps us manage that. Hopefully that kind of helps a little bit of it. There's so much more to it, but.
Right. Wow. So Logan, when you hear Marissa described that way, it kind of goes in line with some of the information you shared on the first episode, especially the traumatic event that happened in your classroom. So would you say that's in line with how the 17 of you were formed? Was it consistently traumatic, or was it just that a part of you in your development years and also disassociating from your family created alters just for another purpose besides a traumatic issue?
I would say that the vast number of my alters are based in different instances of trauma. Like, they could have been traumatic romantic relationships or traumatic family situations, things of that nature. But I do want to bring up again that traumagenic systems are only one part of the dissociative community. There are also endogenic systems, which intentionally allow themselves to become split to achieve like a spirituality of sorts.
Right. I remember you mentioning that. A lot of prototypes that developed in the mind.
Yeah, not every system is traumagenic and not every system is necessarily based in trauma, but many endogenic systems will create alters for themselves because they're dealing with something stressful and they don't want to have to be the one to deal with it alone.
Mm. Yeah, I think you called it a tulpa, right?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Wow. So I think some of the other questions we wanted to touch upon included, were there any medications or treatment methods that could help either deal with it, or resolve it, or support it? Or I think, Marissa, you would probably best know that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different factors that go into it. And I just wanted to touch a little bit about what Logan said too, is sort of when we think about structural dissociation, there's the left part or the part of the mind that kind of goes, that keeps keeping on, that does everyday activities, that is able to sort of like vacillate in between internal, external world, things like that. It also, that part of our body and our mind and our brain help us avoid the right part of the brain, which is the emotional, implicit memory, and procedural learning part of the mind, because that part of the right part of the brain doesn't necessarily always have words. It might have a feeling associated with that. So what we do in terms of like the treatment, let's say, around it, helping normalize the fact that dissociative identity disorder is really just a response to trauma. It is just how our bodies, every single person's bodies dissociate. So sometimes really traumatic things are just too much for us to keep in our conscious awareness of now. So the mind just sort of says, we're going to place it into separate identities of self states. So helping, there's a lot of psychoeducation around the neurobiology of the brain, how the brain works, and what happens in the right part of the brain creates action systems. So what people are familiar with, like the fight, the fight part, the flight part, the freeze, submit, and attach cry. These are the different types of action systems that every human and mammal has. Cats, dogs, all our animals. So like what we do is we do sort of a psychoeducation around normalizing what does that look like? How does each part look? Understanding the emotional experience of each one of those parts. And then when we do that, we start to help understand what movements go with those parts, what emotions, what preferences, what predictions, how did that particular part of ourself see the world? How were we observed in the world? There's a belief system. There's a lot of information around it. So we do a lot of psychoeducation around that, and that's part of the structural dissociation part of it. And helping kind of like what I think Kira and I kind of talked about, or what you guys were talking about too, is what integration looks like. And integration is sort of helping people see who is the self now and what part of that self of the memory is coming back that was maybe traumagenic in some sort of way. And that particular part of us might come with even diagnoses, that might be associated with that time in our life. Almost thinking about it almost like a frozen time in history. And these bodies do these action systems, and there's a whole lot of things around it, but structural dissociation is one part of it. Somatic, what I do is sensory motor psychotherapy, and how trauma lives in the body. And because most of the trauma that we experience is nonverbal, so it lives in our body. And often when we start to connect that It helps people understand that sometimes we have to start with the part of getting to know them, because these parts of ourselves don't want anybody else in, because there's so much protection around it. So I can go on and on about it, but there's a lot of information around it that we start with.
I see Logan nodding his head profusely. So
Yes.
I'd love to get his input on what Marissa has shared.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's based on Logan. You're already in treatment of sorts. I gather that's for your D.I.D. in addition to whatever symptoms you're going through. Would you say that based on your nodding of your head or even your treatment that Marissa has echoed the kind of treatment protocol you're going through?
Yeah, so a big thing about D.I.D. is that there's no cure and there's no like end all be all solution for treatment, because again, every system functions differently. So you have to work with the system to find a treatment plan that works to help them with their individual needs as not only just a physical person, but also as they are separated in the brain. For example, my doctor, who is a phenomenal individual, basically said to me when we started practice, like, hey, I want you to design your own path. What do you want to focus on first? And I told him about this and that I didn't want to necessarily make it go away, but I wanted these symptoms that are caused in conjunction with it, like increased anxiety, depression, all that kind of stuff. Because if you have multiple facets of your brain that are suffering from anxiety, it is just amplified anxiety.
Yes.
So we can't treat the condition, but we can treat the symptoms. So I'm on an anxiety medication that is there for treating the anxiety that is amplified as a result of being a system with multiple anxious goblins in a trench coat.
Wow. You know what? We're headed for our second break. I want to go more into that. In addition, hopefully your Twitch audience out there is ready to shoot all the questions they have for us. Or we're just going to continue to ask our own questions as they evolve from this very interesting conversation. Marissa, I already can say that I think we need to have even another show where you talk about some of the other mental health treatments, because you definitely, I guess you're in the social work side of things, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
So you look at things like PTSD as well as other mind dysfunctions, let's just call them. But D.I.D. obviously seems to be a preferred mode that you typically deal with at this time, right?
It's sort of like on, like as Logan said, it's a spectrum. Like, yeah, and so there's a lot to go into with that.
So, ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for this episode of Frank About Health on talkradio.nyc, as well as all of our socials, especially you Twitch users out there. We'll be looking forward to your questions when we return in a few. See you soon.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Were you an essential worker during the pandemic? If you needed to learn stages of epilepsy, did you depend on advocates? Did you use new innovations to cope with mental and neurological issues? Maintaining high quality of life and keeping good mental health are what we all strive for. I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each week top healthcare influencers, professionals, and innovators answer these questions and more. Stay tuned on Thursdays at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will continue to be frank about health with all of you.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back. Now, we were just talking about the symptomology that Logan is going for his treatment. And I guess in most mental health conditions, I mean, I have epilepsy, but I have my associated depression and anxieties and other things. And I take medication not just to control the seizures, but sometimes they also help with my mood. And of course, there are comorbidities that come with epilepsy in particular, especially because I consider it a lifestyle condition. But when you have a situation such as Logan, where you are actually experiencing the symptoms, some of which might be generated by the alternative personalities, it begs lots of questions which I continue to come up with. One of which, based on what you said, Logan, would you say that the depression or anxiety is part of one of your alters that came from either the right or left side of the brain? Is it that specific, or is it just an encompassing summary of all of them?
That is a very loaded question.
I know. That's why I wanted to ask it in the right way that it fits you.
So, the depression and anxiety. The thing about, sorry, I'm trying to figure out the best way to word this so that it makes sense to more people than just me.
Sure.
The thing about D.I.D as a whole is that imagine you have a cake and you cut a piece out of that cake and you set it aside. The cake represents the brain as a whole, and the piece you just cut out is an alter that formed from the original piece.
Right.
Now, imagine you take that piece of cake and you share it with somebody else, splitting that piece of cake again. That alter has just split into two different alters that could have both inherited a profile from the original.
Amazing.
But then you go back to the original cake and you cut off another piece, and then you split that piece 3 ways. So each alter comes from another part of the brain, not necessarily from the main proponent, but from anything that came from the brain as a whole. So if one alter, like, say the first piece of cake you cut off had depression. I feel bad for that cake, but
right.
If that first piece of cake had depression, it's possible that one or both of the proponent pieces would have also inherited that depression when it's split into 2 different beings.
Incredible. Very interesting. So that would mean that the other piece of cake that was split off may not even have depression at all.
Exactly.
But just be aware that someone else within the system is depressed.
Right.
I was talking to a medical doctor the other day, and I told him about our show today. And he said that he was aware, I don't think he necessarily had this experience, but he said that he knew that doctors have had people with this condition, that one of them, say, I mean, you're talking about depression and anxiety, but one might have diabetes and the other one doesn't. So who do they treat? How do they treat?
So when it comes to physical ailments with alters, that is a very different conversation because, like, it's your brain playing tricks on the rest of your body, causing different chemical reactions. Like, a lot of what goes on with the body is the brain having different reactions to different things.
Right.
Like depression is the brain reacting to a lack of dopamine, I think is the right.
Yes.
Yeah. So like the brain might have different interactions with different alters based on that alter's chemical format. For example, 3 of my alters, dodeca, quin, and core. Dodeca is an ageless being that can't feel pain.
Wow.
Dodeca is like hypersensitive to touch around the rest of the body, but pain can't be felt at all. Quin is mute, and therefore when Quin is fronting, for whatever reason, even though the rest of us can very clearly talk, Quin can't get the brain to send messages to the vocal cords to bring out the voice.
Wow.
And then there's Core, who is a robot and is basically like my internal check engine light. Keeps track of diagnostics of everyone else and is hyper aware of every single piece of like even the mildest pain that touches the system. Like if I crack my pinky toe while I'm walking, Core is immediately like, symptom detected, locating source.
Incredible.
So treating alters in a system when all of that can change on a dime, you would have to have like a personalized care plan for you and the others in your system for them to do what they need to do when they're fronting.
Yes.
How have you handled that, Marissa?
Yeah, my first thought usually with what in the training related to is to immediately understand the autonomic nervous system. And to do that is to really understand that, let's think of, for example, what particular things trigger each part. First, getting a mapping of who is in the system. And we may not know why, but just who. And what to each one of those particular parts, how do they protect the body? Because what might feel like what other people might feel as negative or risky type behaviors is a way of helping the body, like substance use is a perfect example. In one way, it helped. The flight response is the part that takes care of that. It says, I'm going to take this particular part of us away so we don't have to feel. We can be distant in some sort of way. And it doesn't always have to be substance use. It could also be maybe we don't want to go into a particular area that's really traumatic. So the body distances us in some sort of way. But then there's also this piece around, let's say substance use is the biggest sort of thing around it sometimes, is that it might have been the most reliable relationship in your life. So it becomes that sort of part of us where we start to think about how attachment cry comes in, which is the part of us that reaches out for help. But that part also has different versions of what love looks like. So love might look abusive. So people might want to be engaging in the same relationships but can't really see the type of behavior that's being exhibited because attachment cry is essentially a child trying to reach out for any type of affection. There's so much more to it, but like the submission response is also where depression might lie too. But all of these particular stress responses, even fight, flight, freeze, which is where anxiety lives, where panic lives, where fear lives. And oftentimes that freeze response will create what they call like a speechless terror. The body can't speak. They can't speak of. So a part might say, I feel the terror of whatever that experience was, so I'm not going to speak it. I can't, like I physically cannot. And so we help understand sort of all of these action systems because certain words will bring up an action system. And that's how parts step in and parts step out. Somebody will say something and it will remind the body not necessarily of a visual image, but it might be a body image. So the body experiences like a feeling flashback in the body. It isn't always just an image flashback. So a certain type of word or an impression, or like the fight response is a part that really monitors people. How did they say it? What was their tone? What word did they use? How did they use that word? Because that particular stress response never wants these vulnerable parts of ourselves to ever be shown and be heard again. So they're protector responses. So we start to help, okay, here they all are. Which responses are protectors and which responses hold vulnerable emotions? So understanding these action systems is, even if you don't have any PTSD or on the line of stress conditions, which is usually PTSD, maybe borderline, sort of that, other specified dissociative disorder, and then dissociative identity disorder. And they're all like a primary, secondary, and tertiary sort of line of things. But what we're doing is sort of helping really understand what had to happen. So the body is using these action systems to prevent that memory or feeling from coming. So a flight response will be like, I'm going to avoid this topic altogether. So there's a lot of different ways when we start to understand that, even if we don't have trauma in our background, which every person has trauma in some facet or another, it helps us understand who we are as human beings. So that's how I really normalize it, even if you don't experience trauma. Really, that helps.
Did we miss the answer, though, about diabetes or other physical elements, or that was just a comparison from what you were saying?
From what
I mean, you had mentioned something about how some alters might actually have diabetes, for example.
Right. Well,
and then another one doesn't, like the doctor was telling me.
Right.
Who did they treat?
Right. Oftentimes, well, we have to just treat the whole person. If it is something, as Logan said, that is an everyday impairing experience, we treat that particular thing. It might not be useful for other parts of the system that have different capacity levels. And I think that's what he's talking about. I think, Logan, like each part has a different capacity level than another.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, we're about to take our final break, and I have even more questions I don't think we even got to, but and I know, Karen, you were going to give a statement about hypnosis and where it plays in with certain D.I.D systems. So when we return, we'll get into that. We'll clean up house with some remaining questions, probably get to know a little bit about some of Logan's alters if he can introduce us to some, if that's doable. I don't want to create something that I can't turn back. But
I've already got a couple people asking to say hello, so.
Well, I guess, ladies and gentlemen, the next segment is going to be the concluding segment on this Dissociative Identity Disorder Day, right here on Frank About Health, and it will be a little bit of I wouldn't want to call it a show because it's a learning experience at the same time. So please just stay tuned right here on talkradio.nyc and all of our socials. We'll be right back.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Hey, everybody. Now, we're about to wrap up the show, but not without first Karen giving her comments on hypnosis and D.I.D., then Marissa sharing a little bit about her practice, and finally, Logan introducing us to some of his alters that would like to say hi. So let's start with you, Karen.
I'll be very brief on the subject of hypnosis and D.I.D. I would not approach it. I would want to do a lot more study. I'd probably start with a conversation with Marissa, but I would think it would be very difficult to use hypnosis with someone who had D.I.D. But let me just throw in a little bit about my practice, just so that if there is somebody out there who is interested in hypnosis, I work with a number of areas: chronic pain, sleep issues. Right now, I'm working more and more with sports hypnosis, people who want their kids to get that scholarship, or they're working toward a championship or elite level, and I can help them get there. So there's a whole world of sports hypnosis, and I'm certified in it and love doing that work. So there are so many areas where hypnosis can be life-changing, and I welcome people to use the link that they see at the bottom of my screen and just have a complimentary call with me. I'd love to do that.
Yes. And you, Marissa, with Telos Health, tell us about how the practice is currently operating.
Well, it's just me in the practice. So I don't have openings, but I obviously do take like consultations or things like that. But I suppose if individuals want to learn more about trauma, I do have some information on my website, but there are a couple authors maybe that if I can kind of sort of plug here a little bit that I think would be really good to help understand different systems, or just how does memory work after trauma? How do action systems work for every single individual, and how does it play out now in our adult lives? Janina Fisher has a lot of work around like healing the fragmented mind, living the legacy of truth. There's a lot of workbooks and like card deck systems that have like everyday sort of things, like how to help make sure that you're not going back into that trauma vortex. Like Bessel van der Kolk has a lot of information about how the body keeps a score. There's also like Gabor Matt, he has a lot of information about that as well. I always try to help people see that when we start to understand the neurobiology of our systems, we start to understand how trauma is always protecting us, like our body is always protecting us from that trauma. And I always also mention that our bodies never betray us. Everything we do is in an effort to protect us in some sort of way, even if it doesn't feel healthy. It's in some way. So we sort of normalize our experiences in that way.
Awesome. And I gather Logan, and again, the name, everyone, is Logan Pethtel. I have learned it the first time it was told to me. I'm proud of myself for that. That being said, Logan, I know that we've had our moments where I've had a chance to meet some of your alters, but only when they are appropriate. Again, this is a live show, and at the same time, I'm trying to treat you and all of your alters with the same individual respect that I would give to 18 different people. So that being said, are you able to introduce us to any of those that are willing to come out, but at the same time preserve you for the very purpose of the show?
Yeah. I actually have a couple that are waiting in the wings, as you would say, to say hello. We basically have been sitting here debating during this conversation and during the break of who's actually coming out to say hi, so that we don't have like 5 or 6 people trying to scramble to get a hand on the wheel and we just end up turning into brain mud.
Right.
Because that's a thing that can happen. Sometimes the alters in the brain can't differentiate themselves from each other and they'll just turn into goop.
Understood. So who's the first person
that you are getting to say hello to? Velvet.
Velvet?
Velvet. Like
Velvet.
Red.
Okay.
You'll just have to give me 1 second to check myself out.
Sure.
Oh. Okay, I guess we're here. Hi.
Hi, Velvet. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet all of you, too. This is weird.
Well, is this the first time you've met a bunch of people in a while? Have you been hiding out for a while?
No, I think this is the first like group of people I've met at the same time, and like I think the entire time I've been a part of the system. I used to be under a different name, and then a big event happened, and the me that I used to be broke and turned into the me that I am now. Like, it wasn't becoming separate alters or anything. It was just I kind of broke, and then Cora and Dodeca spent time putting me back together, and they couldn't find all the pieces, and the pieces they did find kind of molded it back together into what I am now.
New and improved, right?
Can you describe yourself for us?
Well, as you can probably tell by the voice, I am female. I am younger than some of the other alters in the system at 16. I don't really know how to like this. I can describe what I look like in here. I have purple hair. I'm short. I like writing stories and letting people enjoy those stories, mostly through like Dungeons and Dragons style storytelling and interactive storytelling. And I like spicy snacks and Code Red.
Very nice. So how is Logan like your hero, or he's your one of your best friends?
Well, Logan is just the name of the body overall. There's not an alter in the system actually named Logan.
I understand.
There used to be, but then he went through like a whole like self-improvement regimen and changed himself and eventually became Jason, who is the alter that is actually the host of the system. Basically, the guy that's in charge of everything.
I see.
Like, systems have different roles. There's hosts, there's co-hosts, there's protectors.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm one of the 2 co-hosts, along with the one named Omega, the one that normally does all the work for the station.
Interesting. And now I'm getting the indication that we're about to sign off, and I really wanted to get to know Omega or any of the others. I guess maybe we could save that for a later time, but do you think that Omega can come back out so we can close the show? It was nice meeting you. And
yeah, of course.
Okay. And we want to talk with you again some other time in the near future.
That was fast. Hi, I'm back.
Okay, so I know you Logan, but you're really Omega.
So
I know you as Logan, but you're really Omega.
Yep.
Amazing. Omega, my God, I gotta say, I think I once told you that you were told by some people that had watched the show that you were actually a hero to them. And I want to say that just meeting Velvet right now, I think that you are a hero to her, because she was explaining your whole development, even though she's only 16. So you have I mean, what would you say, Marissa? Is that a form of integration of sorts or management?
Yeah, I mean, I don't treat Logan traditionally.
Sure.
But like I would say that we would just sort of look at it. I suppose, see some sort of co-consciousness of like awareness of different parts in a system, and really just understand that even different parts have different developmental states. So it's a lot to think about, but like a lot of those particular parts might have their own history there that may not like when Logan was mentioning earlier, that parts that might split off, like maybe there's too much material that particular part is holding, so another part might split off from that so as to not have that one particular part be overwhelmed with a particular memory or feeling or action urge in the system. And so we start to understand like the different movements, developmental movements that might not have been able to happen or had been truncated in some way. So those are a lot of different things that we would look at, or that I look at in general.
Incredible. I'm having the feeling that this is definitely going to be another follow-up after a while from now. But I got to say that the whole nature of dissociative identity disorder, I wouldn't even qualify it as a mental health issue, even though obviously it has symptomology of it. It is definitely a lifestyle issue, or a way of individuals existing in this world with all of us, whatever our impairments may or may not be. That all being said, I'm actually having to sign off on the show, and yet I don't really want to, because I'm enjoying this conversation with all three of you. So let's put it this way. I had shown in the last commercial break where the original episode that aired in January is now sitting on my website, frankrharrison.com. For any of you listeners and viewers out there who saw the show tonight and don't know what show we were talking about, please feel free to access it. Also on the YouTube page that talkradio.nyc has, the show is archived right there. And it definitely makes you leave the show wanting more. And that all being said, I will be taking a hiatus for the next 3 weeks in preparation for the next month's show with Karen in Chicago, where I would like her to tell what month we are celebrating and who our guest is going to be. But more importantly, the purpose of the hiatus is to be prepared to have more high caliber programming on Frank About Health that looks at cases like Logan's, but also looks at other cases. I've been approached to look at Down syndrome, as well as looking at other kinds of issues that are affecting our society today, not just the average everyday illness that I've spent the last 2.5 years talking about, in addition to people's books, in addition to people's podcasts and practices, which I will continue to do. But I'm looking to provide insight into those movers and shakers out there in the health and wellness space, including the medical professionals that you, Marissa, are the first to appear on Frank About Her Health, first in January and now today. And Karen, I'd like you to let everyone know who the second is going to be on Thursday, April 4th.
Yes, our guest will be Dr. Mort Orman. He is an internal medicine physician, somewhat retired. He likes to play his golf, but he continues to write. He is the author of 22 books, many of them having to do with stress and anxiety, but his focus is anger. And his newest book comes out the end of March, which is specifically The Anger Cure. And he has a 10-week program that he works people through Angry No More. And he's just a terrific guy, has great ideas. I think it'll be a fascinating conversation about how to rid anger from your life. Not deal with it, not manage it, get rid of it.
Awesome. And it's Stress Awareness Month, March?
And it's stress, and he actually created, not sure if I have the exact title, but National Stress Awareness Day, I think. But we'll talk about that. So he created an acknowledgement about stress for the month of April.
Awesome. All right. That all being said, Logan, again, you are, for Frank About Health, you've been my hero for the last 4 or 5 months, but even more so, thank you again for sharing your story and to introduce us to Velvet. And we definitely will be in touch for a lot of other reasons. But that all being said, I'm just going to sign off the show for now. Because I'm on hiatus, all I can say is stay tuned for our slate of shows tomorrow, Philanthropy in Focus, and always Friday. And next week with the Hard Skills and the Conscious Consultant and an encore performance of Frank About Health. I've already have my 3 that I'm scheduling, and I guess you'll have to tune in to talkradio.nyc to hear what they are about. That all being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today on Frank About Health. Thank you, Marissa. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Logan. And thank you, behind the scenes, Emily, for helping produce this show again. And we'll see you all in a month at the Hilton Doubletree, Chicago. All righty. Take care.